He was a king chosen by God himself. He started out as this incredible hero. So what happened? How did it all go so spectacularly wrong? That's what we're digging into today. The rise and the really tragic fall of King Saul, straight from the first book of Samuel.
All right, so let's jump right in. We're starting at the very beginning, really at Saul's highest moment, where he absolutely proves himself as a decisive and divinely inspired leader. So picture this. The crisis Israel is facing, it's just brutal. I mean, deeply humiliating. The Ammonite king Nahash doesn't just want them to surrender. No, he offers them peace only if he can gouge out the right eye of every single man. This wasn't just about war. It was a psychological blow, a reproach upon all Israel. And this is the very first test for their brand new and, let's be honest, pretty unproven king.
And this is where we see Saul at his absolute peak. When the Spirit of God guides him, he acts with this incredible clarity. His anger isn't some petty rage. It's this righteous, Spirit-filled fire against injustice. And that call to arms, cutting up the oxen, it sounds graphic, but man, it was exactly what a divided and terrified nation needed to see to rally together.
And here, this is Saul at his very best. He could have taken revenge on the people who doubted him, but he doesn't. He shows mercy, saying, "For today the Lord hath wrought salvation in Israel." Right now, he looks like everything Israel could have ever hoped for in a king. He's powerful, he's merciful, and he's a unifier. It's perfect.
But right after this incredible high, the story takes a sharp turn. The king is established, everyone's celebrating, and then the prophet Samuel steps up, and he delivers this really powerful farewell address. And listen, this isn't just him saying goodbye. This is him laying down the law, setting the rules and the stakes for this whole new era of having a king. Samuel basically lays it out in the simplest terms you can imagine. He says, look, the formula for your success as a nation, it's not about having a bigger army or a smarter political strategy. It all comes down to one thing: simple obedience to God. And you got to notice the key condition here. The standard for the king is exactly the same as the standard for the people. There are no special rules for the guy in charge. Being king isn't a free pass to ignore God's law. The warning is just crystal clear. If you disobey, it's going to lead to ruin for everybody, from the palace right on down. And just to really hammer this point home, Samuel calls for a sign from heaven. Now try to imagine this. It's the dry wheat harvest season. There should not be rain. And suddenly, God sends thunder and rain. It would have been completely shocking, a totally unnatural event. It was God's way of showing them, in a way they couldn't miss, hey, when you asked for a human king, you were rejecting me as your true king. Okay, so the warning has been given. The terms are set. Everyone knows the rules. And now we get the first major test of Saul's obedience. And, unfortunately, it's also his first catastrophic failure. You can just feel the pressure building on Saul, can't you? I mean, day after day, he's staring down this massive Philistine army, described as being like the sand on the seashore. And at the same time, he's watching his own terrified soldiers just dissolving, scattering and hiding. His faith is being pushed to the absolute limit. So what does he do? In his own words, Saul says, "I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering." He knew it was wrong. He knew it was Samuel's job, but he justified this direct act of disobedience because of the circumstances. He thought it was a necessary evil, to keep the army from completely falling apart.
And wow, Samuel's rebuke is just immediate and devastating. The timing is almost cruel, isn't it? He shows up the second Saul finishes this illegal sacrifice. And the consequence? It changes everything. This single act of impatience, of disobedience, has just cost Saul his dynasty. The kingdom will not continue with his family.
So this next chapter, it's fascinating because it sets up this stark contrast in leadership. We get to see the huge difference between acting in faith and acting on, foolish impulse. And it's all happening within the same family.
Yeah, this contrast just couldn't be any clearer. On one hand, you have Jonathan, Saul's son. He sneaks off with just his armor bearer, and he says something amazing. God can save by many or by few. He is acting in pure, radical faith. And while he's off doing that, where's his father, King Saul? He's back at camp, acting out of fear and ego, and, frankly, making some really foolish decisions.
I mean, this was just terrible leadership. In the middle of a battle that God is helping them win, Saul makes this rash oath, cursing any soldier who eats food. It was driven by this need to look pious and in control, not by actual wisdom. And what happens? The oath actually gets in the way of the victory. His soldiers become faint and too weak to finish the fight. And this part is so telling. The regular soldiers, the guys on the front lines, they could see that God was with Jonathan. But the king? He's so trapped by his own dumb oath that he can't see it. It's this incredible moment where the army actually has to step in and rescue their hero from their own king.
Okay, so this brings us to the climax of Saul's downfall. After all his previous mistakes, you'd think he'd have learned his lesson. And he gets one more chance. God gives him a clear, direct, no room for interpretation command. It's a final test to prove his obedience.
And listen, there was zero ambiguity here. This wasn't some complex theological puzzle he had to figure out. It was a straightforward, absolute command. Go and utterly destroy the Amalekites. Spare nothing. A direct order from God, delivered by the prophet Samuel. Simple.
So of course, Saul doesn't do it. And when Samuel confronts him, just listen to Saul's excuse. It's this classic two-step of blame shifting. First, he points the finger. Oh, the people spared the best animals. Then he tries to wrap his disobedience in a cloak of piety, claiming, oh, but we saved them to sacrifice to your God.
And this is Samuel's timeless, powerful reply. It's really the core lesson of this whole tragic story. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. God is far more interested in our obedience than in our big religious shows or our well-intentioned gifts. The number one thing he's looking for is a heart that actually listens and does what he says.
See, Saul did obey, but only on his own terms. He destroyed the stuff that was vile and refuse, the worthless things, but he kept the good stuff, what he and the people valued. And in God's eyes, that kind of selective, partial obedience, it's just plain disobedience.
And this is it, the point of no return. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. It's final. Twice Saul has rejected what God said, and now God confirms his rejection as king. The kingdom is officially, irreversibly torn away from him. And that's really the tough question this story leaves us with, right? It's so easy for us to sit back and judge a king from 3,000 years ago, but it forces us to look in the mirror. How often do we do the same thing? How often do we justify our own disobedience, maybe with really good intentions, telling ourselves that our partial obedience is good enough? It makes you think.